The theater lights dim slowly as the murmur of the audience dissolves into expectant silence. From somewhere behind the curtains, an upright bass attacks 3 deep notes. Then a cymbal shimmers as if scratching the surface of a nighttime lake. The curtain opens and the dancer appears in backlighting, hat pulled low over his eyes, gloves that catch every reflection, shoes polished like mirrors. In the next instant he glides backward, but his chest advances. His shoulders float and his body seems to defy the ordinary logic of friction. The audience holds its breath, certain that something supernatural has just happened. Decades later, that image would remain alive, imprinted in music videos, GIFs, memes, memories of shows no one attended, but everyone swears they saw. Yet the moment that was born, there already carried nearly 100 years of history. Before there was a name called Moonwalk, there were smoke-filled jazz clubs in Harlem, French mimes pushing invisible walls through the streets of Paris, tap dancers polishing hardwood with wax and sweat in exchange for coins, and neighborhood kids in Los Angeles testing the limits of hot asphalt. This is the journey to discover who, after all, invented the step that led pop culture to flirt with gravity. This is not about dismantling a myth, but revealing the constellation of artists whose orbits crossed so that Michael Jackson, on the night of Motown 25, would seem to visit the moon without leaving Earth. Close your eyes, adjust your headphones. To the sound of the beat that emerges now, we will travel through neon-lit alleys, through halls where swing drowned out the creaking of floors, through cramped studios where young choreographers discovered that a good mirror is worth more than an entire stage. Prepare yourself to encounter truths, legends, controversies, and above all the certainty that no dance step is ever born alone. Let us return to 1928. A humid night in Harlem. The Cotton Club packed with well-to-do gentlemen, ladies in satin gloves, waiters gliding trays of champagne between cramped tables. On stage, Cab Calloway holds the microphone by its base, twirls his body, lifts his chin, and, in the middle of an impossible scat, decides to play with the waxed floor, bends his knees, transfers his weight to his left foot, and lets his right foot escape backward as if pulled by an invisible thread. Those who were there would later recount, awestruck, that he simply floated. There is no official footage of that first night, but a 1932 newsreel captured similar movement, and the roll of celluloid, though shaky, exhibits the embryo of what decades later we would call the Moonwalk. The audience, accustomed to seeing tappers hammer the stage with steel and noise, encountered there the antithesis of sound, a silence that suggests magic. In the years that followed, street artists in New Orleans incorporated the trick into their routines, dusting tailors' chalk on the soles of their shoes to reduce friction, and on lucky days covering the floor with soap shavings stolen from the yards of fancy hotels. Thus emerged a secret code shared only among those who lived from the unstable tips of sidewalk performance. The less noise, the greater the illusion, the greater the coin. This silent pact would traverse Louisiana, climbing the Mississippi to Chicago, where vaudeville dancers were hired to do the slide during the intermissions of comic numbers. In 1955, in a low-budget film called Rhythm and Blues Review, Bill Bailey, an ex-burlesque tapper, decides to end his number by tilting his hat, crossing his arms, and backing in a straight line while smiling at the camera. It is quick, less than 2 seconds of film, but the effect was enough to inspire choreographers who decades later would study each frame as if deciphering an ancestral scroll. The famous rivalry with Bill Bojangles Robinson, another genius of nimble feet, though devoted to the metallic sound of tap, helped spread stories about fine sawdust, varnished leather soles, floors waxed with beeswax. These recipes, transmitted in whispered camaraderie, created an ideal ecosystem for the step to have no single author, but rather a collectivity of inventors who almost always would never ascend to a stage large enough to hear them. Meanwhile, Caribbean clubs in immigrant neighborhoods of New York played calypso and ska. There, Musicians and dancers mixed island rhythms with the bouncy jazz of the big city. The sliding of feet accompanied the sway of percussion, and each new beat suggested a brief escape from gravity. The curious lenses of street photographers captured, in 1948, a young Jamaican man apparently walking backward in the courtyard of a Sunday school. The negative lay forgotten until it was rediscovered by historians in the 2000s, but it proves that the gesture already circulated, anonymous, through the suburbs long before any executive thought of the term moonwalk. When the 1960s arrived, television began to steal audiences from theaters, and with it came smoother floors, cameras that could replay close-ups, and above all, the possibility that a gesture, once captured, could be revisited countless times in living rooms across the world. The terrain was ready. All it needed was an artist capable of synthesizing all these influences and projecting them onto a stage that seemed too large to fit on Earth. History, however, would take a few more turns before delivering the step to Michael Jackson. Cut to Paris, 1962. Etienne de Cruz's atelier smells of aged wood and academy chalk. In the center of the worn floor, a young Marcel Marceau rehearses the routine of walking against the wind. Inspired by the silent cinema of Chaplin, he decides that it is not enough to feign an invisible wall. It is necessary to suggest the entire air pushing back, offering resistance. For this, the front footsteps, slides millimeters, almost does not leave the ground while the torso advances in slow motion. In the rear view of the gesture, the other foot retreats so subtly that it seems to be pulled by the imaginary wind. It was not quite backslide in the North American sense, but the principle was nearly identical. Deceiving the spectator with weight transfer distributed millimetrically. Parisian charm attracts visitors from all arts. Among them, a transgressive singer named David Bowie, then a mime student with Lindsay Kemp. Bowie would learn the idea of moving more slowly than the music suggests, creating tension between sound and body. This concept would travel with him to London, connecting glam rock to physical theater. When, already in the 1970s, American soul tours crossed the Atlantic, backup dancers frequented cabarets and small stages where mimes enjoyed success. It only took a few nights of conversation backstage, a few glasses of cheap wine, for techniques of pushing the air to blend with rhythmic maneuvers coming from funk. It was there, witnesses say, that the term backslide gained more technical contours. It literally meant sliding backward while appearing to advance, creating the illusion of terrain shifting beneath your feet. Locking and popping dancers touring with bands like Kool and the Gang took the ferry from Calais to Dover and taught the step to English teenagers in community centers. Grainy videos from 1976 show improvised workshops where an instructor says, "Imagine pushing the floor forward but without leaving your place. Let the floor do the dirty work." There was not yet the mythic aura that global TV would confer years later. But the seed, transplanted from Black America to experimental Europe, germinated at an accelerated pace. Meanwhile, in the German underground, groups of physical theater sought metaphors to mock the military march that echoed, phantasmagorically, through the country's recent history. Sliding backward was a way to ridicule the rigidity of the hard boot that advances in lockstep. The more subtle the movement, the more powerful the provocation. Subtlety became protest. This political dimension of the gesture would barely reach the mainstream, but it would help keep the flame alive of the step as a symbol of resistance, not merely virtuosity. By the end of the decade, VHS tapes exchanged by mail-linked continents. One of these packages traveled from Paris to Los Angeles, containing a recording of Marceau. Jeffrey Daniel, a young California choreographer, watched the mime sliding in a loop. Daniel already mastered popping but lacked a personal signature. He saw in Marceau's wind the perfect complement to funk groove. The modern backslide was born, in a cramped studio in Encino, less theatrical, more rhythmic, with emphasis on the contrabass beat. Within months, soul clubs on the West Coast featured young men who, under black light, seemed to glide. The world stage was approaching. All that was missing was a star big enough to spread the effect like lunar dust across all of pop culture. There is nervousness backstage at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium on March 25, 1983. The Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever special is rehearsing its third hour of recording, and the audience has already witnessed Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, the Supremes. Michael Jackson, then 24 years old, paces anxiously down the corridor, gloves gleaming under fluorescent light. In the dressing room, Jeffrey Daniel adjusts a piece of sandpaper to the toe of the black Florsheim loafers. The ultimate trick so the foot catches at exactly the right moment, creating contrast with the smooth heel glide. Michael, silent, makes the gesture in the air, memorizing every micro-pause of Jeffrey's. Neither of them imagines that, in 40 minutes, they will redefine the word show. When the introduction to Billie Jean begins, Michael advances in short, almost feline steps, touches his hat, plays with the unplugged microphone. The audience recognizes the beat, but does not yet know the final blow. At 2 minutes and 37 seconds, he freezes, lifts his left heel, pushes his right foot backward. Every vertebra seems to vibrate in slow motion. The auditorium, already on its feet, releases a roar that travels through cameras, cables, monitors, and reaches, within 48 hours, screens across the entire planet. The numbers are stunning. Phone lines at stores selling tapes become busy for hours. Japanese newspapers publish caricatures of the step on the front page. In Brazil, Rede Globo broadcasts the sequence on every news program. Children repeat the movement in classrooms and teachers complain because the scratched floor is proof of lunar fever. Michael grants calculated interviews revealing only that a great friend taught him the trick. The ambiguity fuels heated debates. Would he be protecting the secret or simply amplifying the mystery? Academics write essays about cultural appropriation. Fans prefer to believe in miracle. Behind the myth lies meticulous engineering. The stage had been cleaned with a water and detergent solution to remove particles that could catch the shoes. The band played a slightly slowed-down arrangement, allowing the glide to seem even more unnatural. The cameras received instructions not to change angle during the step, ensuring the illusion did not break. Nothing was improvised, but everything seemed spontaneous. Exactly the definition of pop genius. After that night, backslide becomes an insufficient word. The media prefers moonwalk, a term allegedly coined by an exhilarated producer backstage. NASA, which shortly before faced budget cuts, silently thanks the free publicity. Dance now smells like science fiction, shines like silver in the sun, and every child replicates the movement, dreaming of touching craters with the sole of their shoe. The step becomes a toy, becomes a logo, becomes a measure of greatness. If something is incredible, it is moonwalk. But even at this height, deep roots continue to pulse beneath the spectacular veneer. Each centimeter glided carries ghosts of jazz clubs, whispers of mimes. Street tricks passed hand to hand like clandestine treasures. Michael was the perfect messenger, not the inventor, and perhaps therein lies the magic. When singular talent meets collective tradition, is born the kind of moment that makes the world stop spinning for a few seconds. The television miracle of 1983 sowed seeds far beyond show business. In the street dances of the Bronx, the hip-hop scene already fermented with its own creativity, but the moonwalk entered as a catalyst, encouraging battles where the smooth glide served as a finale, a kind of victory signature. Shortly after, music videos by artists like MC Hammer and Janet Jackson added lateral variations, side glide, circle glide, multiplying possibilities. The step ceased to be a straight line and gained curves, diagonals, spirals. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, young South Koreans set up improvised academies and basements to imitate Western choreography. The K-pop industry was still in its infancy, but already understood the value of signature movements to sell entire groups. In 1996, the TV program Inkigayo displays an unknown singer executing a nearly perfect moonwalk, drawing screams from an audience that spoke little English but fluently understood the language of the glide. In that instant, the step became planetary heritage. Science, seduced by the phenomenon, resolved to measure it. Researchers at MIT invited professional dancers to wear shoes equipped with sensors. They discovered that the key lay not only in the low coefficient of friction, but in the horizontal distribution of body mass. The center of gravity must remain within a very narrow corridor. Just let the heel rise a centimeter too much and the illusion breaks. Armed with this data, engineers created smart floors that alter friction under voice command, facilitating learning in dance schools. On the cultural front, museums dedicated to African American history launched campaigns to recognize forgotten pioneers like Bill Bailey. Traveling exhibitions displayed Jeffrey Daniels' original shoe alongside letters in which Marcel Marceau described his philosophy of movement. Each display case, each roundtable discussion, corrects a bit of the injustice of singular credit, returning prominence to voices silenced by media spectacle. Meanwhile, political protests appropriate the gesture. In 2019, Hong Kong protesters wearing surgical masks organized flash mobs in which they executed the moonwalk while retreating from police, transforming retreat into an act of choreographed defiance. In Belém do Pará, street artists combined the step with the frenzied rhythm of technobrega, proving that no matter the beat, if there is ground and imagination, the moon fits there. On social networks, augmented reality filters correct ankle angles in real time, allowing beginners to feel like Motown 25 stars in seconds. And the future? Artificial intelligence algorithms already create hybrid choreographies mixing moonwalk with traditional dances, suggesting unlikely encounters. Gliding tango, lunar samba, anti-gravitational flamenco. Virtual reality adventures allow users to walk on virtual craters, training genuine body balance. Each technological update expands the myth without ever replacing the original thrill of that 1983 glide. Because in the end, the moonwalk is not just a step. It is proof that when art invents new ways of touching the ground, all of humanity feels a little bit lighter. Whenever someone glides backward on an improvised stage, whether at a local street fair or an Icelandic rave at sunrise, we reiterate the old discovery. The moon may remain distant, but the sensation of stepping on it fits, whole, in the sole of a shoe.